So George asked me to give an overview of what's going on with shared print nationally, and I'm going to do that. But I want to talk about sort of what we think of as the collective collection, and you hear that term come up a lot. The idea that collectively we build a collection of resources for through libraries nationally and even internationally, that nobody's collection stands on its own. That's always been true, but it historically has been harder to share resources or to know what other libraries have at sort of an immediate level. With WorldCat and Prospector and other tools like that, that's much easier than it used to be. And certainly as we think about digital collections, we think about shared access as well, at least when we're licensing them together or when they're freely available. So the problem that we're trying to solve here is the fact that we all have these overlapping collections. We have collections that duplicate in whole or in part other collections in the region, other collections nationally, other collections internationally, and as we've moved more and more towards digital collections, those older print collections take up valuable space, right? And this library is a great example of what you can do if you free up that space. Until about 5 years ago, the entire central core of the lower level and the entire central core of the upper level was stacks, and we were about 90% full in our stacks. We had almost no room even to shift for reshelving. It was a crisis point. We had to do something. We were storing things in Pascal at the time. The CU system shared storage facility on the Anschutz campus, but we still needed to do something much more drastic than that. And we also didn't have room for study space and service points in this building. So you can see what happens when you move 75% or so of your bound volumes off-site. So we moved them to an off-site storage facility. We didn't do much weeding. We did a little bit of weeding. We weeded duplicates. We weeded some journals that we have electronically, but we didn't do much weeding of monographs. We just put it in storage. The other solution, of course, is to weed the collection, and that's partly what we're talking about today. So collections take up valuable space that can be used for other purposes. We know that older collections are often unused. 20% of the collection accounts for 80% of the use, which is roughly true in most places. We also know, certainly at DU, we know that the vast majority of usage is for relatively current material. So the analysis that we did, I'm trying to remember this, but I think it was 50% of all usage was things of monographs was things purchased in the last decade or published in the last decade. Another 30% or so of usage was things published in the previous decade. So the most recent 20 years, again, accounted for about 80% of our usage. So it makes sense to think about weeding out older material because it's unused and taking up valuable space. And very often there are 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 copies just in Colorado, and maybe hundreds or thousands of copies nationally. And the other thing that's important to think about, though is not always true, is that many of these things are duplicated electronically. So they're duplicated electronically by something like HathiTrust, or they're duplicated within collections that we've purchased and licensed for our own institutions. So it doesn't hurt to get rid of that print volume at the local level. The concern, of course, is that if we don't do something strategically, if we don't act together, we might discard the wrong things. We don't want to inadvertently discard the last copy, and we want to make sure that we, at the same time, are keeping things that are important locally, that are valuable for our institutions. Even if it is really low-use material, we want to think carefully about how we discard or downsize or right-size the collections of that older material. So there are lots of projects going on nationally. There are projects going on internationally. And it's, I think, useful to think about a network of these projects. And I'll talk a little bit about how to maybe conceptualize that. I want to talk just briefly about some of the projects that are going on and some of the models that maybe we can build on. So one model that most of us probably know about is the Western Regional Storage Trust, which originated in the California Digital Library. It is administered through the CDL. Several of us in Colorado and Wyoming are members of WEST. It is focused on older journals. They don't do, I think the cutoff is journals of 10 years or older, but we've been discussing within the Operations and Collections Committee of WEST, we've been discussing maybe pushing that date a little bit later and doing even more current print journals. It's on print journals. It doesn't matter whether they're duplicated electronically or not. In some cases, we're focusing on journals that are duplicated electronically. In some cases, we're focusing on journals that have no electronic equivalent. So we have multiple different categories of journals that we're trying to archive within WEST. We have 74 members across 18 states. And 35 of those members, including DU, are archive holders, meaning that we have committed to holding in our collections a run of a particular journal or journal family, meaning the different name changes of a journal over time and as that journal splits and comes back together. All of the pieces of that family, all of the volumes in that one institution. And one of the things that WEST does is try to keep a complete run at one institution. So as a WEST member, we have given volumes to other institutions so that they could build a complete run, and we've taken on volumes so that we could build a complete run locally. There are 5 archive builders within WEST, and these are libraries that have committed to a higher level of both in terms of keeping more journals and also spending more staff time validating the condition and the availability of those titles, and have a higher sort of storage and environmental hurdle to clear as well. And the archive builders receive money from WEST, so we pay as WEST members. We pay to be part of the collective, and those fees pay staff at the CDL. And they also pay something to the archive builders. Archive holders just do it. We don't get paid to do the storage there. We've stored over 500,000 volumes, and 41% of those don't have a digital equivalent. So they're things where really there is a concern that if we were not operating collectively, we might inadvertently discard something, an entire run of a journal that maybe is low use and low value at the local level, but has no digital equivalent and maybe never will. CSU, DU, Health Sciences, and Wyoming are members of WEST, and it's certainly open for everybody else. WEST benefits anybody whether you're a member or not, so you can use the volumes that the members here have stored, and you can use the reporting that WEST does on what titles are being archived. So WEST is, I think, a good model for journals. WEST is only about journals. We've been talking internally about whether to expand WEST to include monographs, but so far the consensus has been that we're not ready to do that yet. Another model is the Eastern Academic Scholars Trust, which is new. And is in some ways more ambitious than WEST. So EAST it started out of the Boston Library Consortium, and it's 48 libraries in the Northeast. They do journals and monographs, and they are doing at the monograph level a major analysis of holdings before they begin to make commitments about what they'll store. They're doing an analysis of what sort of overlap they have, what sort of level of uniqueness they have. And then they're also doing some sampling to figure out within this large set right? So they don't want to go and look at each volume. They don't want to have to go to the shelf for every volume that a library commits to, but they also don't want to inadvertently say that one library is going to keep that title, never bother to go to the shelf, never see that they actually have it, and have everybody else discard it. So they're doing some sampling where they are identifying enough titles from their entire corpus that they can look at they can then send people to look at the shelf, verify that title is actually there, and verify that it's in good enough condition. And then they're reporting back, and they're trying to figure out whether you can do something on this scale without having to go and spend that tremendous amount of labor to go and verify condition and availability before you make a commitment. So those are the only ones that I want to talk about in detail, but there are many other projects going on. The Florida Academic Repository, or FLAIR, is the Florida Academic Libraries, and they're doing stuff with government documents and with journals. ASERL, which is the Association of Southeast Research Libraries, which overlaps with FLAIR, right? So the Florida Academic Libraries many of them are members of ASERL. They're doing a journal retention project as well. Another example at a smaller level is RECAP within the New York region. So it's Princeton, New York University, and Columbia. They're doing they have a shared storage facility, and they try not to duplicate when they put into that shared facility. In Maine, there's a shared collections collaborative, which is focused on monographs and actually has some teeth behind it, where you are sort of committing to, it's not just a passive program. Many of these programs, I should say, are sort of passive, right? One library commits to keeping it. No other library has to do anything based on that commitment. You just know that there is a last copy. And so in West, we've committed to keeping particular journal runs. All other 78 members in West could decide they want to keep that journal too. In Maine, they're requiring libraries to hit certain targets on getting rid of volumes, which is tricky. Not particular volumes, but they have a target for each year of how much they're supposed to decrease their collections by. There are lots of other programs out there, and it's really in some ways too much to keep up with. But every ALA, on the Friday morning at ALA Midwinter and Annual, is the Print Archive Network, which is a forum run by the Center for Research Libraries. I've been to 3 or 4 of these over the years. George, I think, goes pretty regularly. I know Yem has been to a couple of them. These are programs where you can check in and hear about what's going on nationally, and I would urge you to try to attend. It's pretty worthwhile as a way of learning what's happening in different programs across the country. All right, so how does this work, and how does this apply to us? This is a slide that I stole this from Rick Lugg's blog, and Rick Lugg, with Ruth Fisher, his wife, set up the company that is now called Green Glass Solutions, which is part of OCLC, which is a content comparison tool. And they also have a service where they help libraries figure out what their overlap is and help them think about decreasing collection size. And what I like about this slide, this idea of a distributed model, is that you can solve problems of overlap at different levels, and they can fit into each other. So it's useful to have a print title within a group, and in this case, the group could be the Colorado Alliance of Research Libraries. It could be the University of Colorado system. It could be something smaller or larger than that. But within a small group, like the Colorado Alliance, it makes sense to think about what level of duplication we want. It probably makes sense to have one copy of a monograph as sort of our minimum as we think about decreasing collection size across the region. We could probably agree we don't need 8 copies, but we probably should agree that we want 1 copy. right? So that at the minimum, nobody has to wait longer than what the prospector delivery time is for that low use title. But then we also want to think about the region. And so the region might be prospector, which is a little bit bigger than the alliance. It might be that we're thinking about the Rocky Mountain West and we're thinking about interlibrary loan. But that we want to think about more broadly. And there might be multiple different projects going on within that same region. And then print in the collective collection. And when we talk about the collective collection, we're typically talking nationally or internationally. And there you start to think about how these programs overlap and what the minimum number of print titles you might want across the country or across North America or across the world. And then finally, how does that all fit in with something like HathiTrust? Because we know that the content is being preserved in some ways through HathiTrust, but the physical object is valuable in other ways, right? So if there's a readily available digital copy, do you think about it differently than if not, or are we thinking only in terms of print? But there's sort of overlapping everything is what's available digitally. Here's another way of thinking about modeling shared print planning, and this is from an OCLC report on talking about collecting at the mega scale, so print management at the mega scale, meaning how do we think about it as with broad regions collecting same content? And they identified 4 models. The hub model is about use, right? So it's a shared collection with use as a goal, right? It's not about preservation, it's about access. And the shared collection is physically consolidated. And Pascal is a perfect model of that here, right? So Pascal, most of what's in Pascal circulates. It's coming from multiple different collections. In theory, when you put something into Pascal, if there's a volume already there, you discard your local copy. Pascal is a way of sharing, of decreasing collection size while still preserving it and making sure that it's accessible. A flow model is one where you commit and make promises to each other about what you will keep and allowing you to discard. It's only integrated virtually. So Prospector is a good model of that, right? So whether you're thinking about Prospector and Prospector never has been a way of decreasing print collections. It's a tool that allows us to do that, but it's never been, that's not its intent. But if you think about Prospector as a way of doing that, as a way of managing access to a shared collection, that's the flow model, right? That you make decisions locally. You make decisions locally based on decisions that others in that network have made. The stock model and these are their terms, is a model where backup or preservation is the goal, right? The goal is not access, and in fact, this last copy is not really intended for access except in extreme cases, right? The idea is that there would be other copies out there that can be used. And the project that the CDL has done where they've backed up, they've retained a print copy of everything that's in JSTOR. They've done this in partnership with JSTOR and CRL and Harvard, and they do not circulate those. They do a lot. They do page level verification, right? It's really labor intense. It's consolidated into the northern and southern regional storage facilities in California. It's a really expensive, very labor intensive process, and it's probably as effective a model as you could have for preservation, but it's expensive and probably not scalable. And then there's a distributed model where, again, backup is the goal. I put West down here, even though West is really about, West allows sharing. So you don't promise to back that copy up and preserve it and make it sort of difficult to use. But in a sense, the goal of West is preservation. I think it's useful to think about those models and think about how they can play off of each other and think about how we might use them as we think about planning what to do within Colorado and Wyoming. This is from that same report, and this is the idea of mega scale. So they've identified, and they're not the ones who came up with these mega regions. These mega regions came from some other report, and they thought it was a useful construct for thinking about collective collections or regional collective collections. And you notice here that Denver is one of the very smallest on here, but it is a region that they've thought of, right? So if you think about preserving within each of these regions, and therefore preserving across the country, that's, I think, a useful way of thinking about it too. And what's neat is that they've identified the fact that within Denver, there are, I can't read it from here, 4 million publications and about 10 million holdings, and that's mostly the people in the room, right? Okay, so the Alliance Shared Print Trust, and George will talk about this in much more detail, but the Alliance Shared Print Trust is our attempt at thinking about how to intentionally right-size our collections, right? So rather than separately going out and sending things to storage or sending things or weeding them from the collection entirely, how do our decisions impact the group and the region? So the Shared Print Trust is and George will talk in great detail about this, but it's a memorandum of understanding and some supporting documents that are the infrastructure that allow us to collaborate. And we can choose whether we want to participate in an active way or a passive way. So participation could be purely passive. I make decisions at DU. They're the decisions I would make anyway. I mark things as last copy because I know I'm going to keep them. I don't make any decisions based on what anybody else does. You can do what you want with the decision I've made, but that could be the level of participation. Or we could try to work together and think about how to collectively identify things that we're going to preserve and then act on that. And I know that CU Boulder has committed to keeping this particular title, therefore we are going to right now withdraw it from our collection. So we could do it at sort of any level of participation. And participation can be very moderate, right? I could say, you know what, I'm only going to participate for journals, or I'm only going to participate for the monographs that are in my storage facility. Or it could be at a high level. And I think it's important to note and to stress that participation can and really should overlap with other programs, right? So I've already committed DU to retaining certain journal volumes and journal runs for West. I'm already committed to keeping that. I have no ability to get rid of that title for 25 years, so why not commit within the Alliance Shared Print Trust as well? Okay, so I think it's easy to do some of these things and really difficult to do some other things. It's really easy, I think, to declare an intent to keep a particular title. And again, especially if that's something we've already committed to for some other program like West. And if you're a Pascal library, if you've committed for that group. It would be really difficult to say, well, we have a title in Pascal, but we're not willing to commit to keeping it for the larger group because it's already committed to. And again, it's also, I think, if it's already important to you locally, and you know that under no circumstances would you ever get rid of that title, other than damage or loss, right? But you wouldn't actively try to get rid of particular titles in your collection. If you know that, why not mark that as a last copy, allowing others to get rid of it if possible? And for just an example, if it's something that's in your circulating collection, but links really strongly to something that you have a special collection in. For us, that might be cookbooks. We have a very strong cookery collection. We have thousands of cookbooks in special collections, but we have tens of thousands of cookbooks in the circulating collection, and we're not going to get rid of any of them, right? We have no intention of ever getting rid of any of those. We could go in and we could mark each of those as a last copy and commit to keeping those. I also think if you've already put something in high-density storage, it's really expensive to pull something out of high-density storage, because then you have to figure out how to put something back into that same spot. So that's another place where it might make sense to just do a wholesale commitment to retaining it. It's much harder, though, I think, to decide that you want to keep something that's maybe secondary to you for the good of the group, right? So I'd have a hard time at DU committing to keeping vet med books for the good of the group. I just wouldn't do that. It doesn't make any sense. But maybe there is some secondary, that's probably tertiary for us. But maybe there is some secondary material that we would want to, that we might have a hard time committing to, but for the good of the group, we might want to do that. It's also, I think, difficult to make coordinated decisions, right? So it's easy to say, we'll keep all the cookbooks. It's a lot harder to then say, well, we're going to keep all the cookbooks. What are you going to do with cookbooks? And we're going to decide at the same time how to do that. And maybe you need to do that, and maybe we don't. But that's part of what we want to talk about today. So next steps, and this is really just to get us thinking about the afternoon discussion. So moving beyond just reacting to what others have done, right? So I can commit to keeping cookbooks. You can do whatever you want, right? You can react to that or not. But how do we get beyond that? Can we identify projects where we right-size our collective collection together, where we know up front that one library is going to keep something and everybody else is either going to be able to get rid of or will commit to getting rid of some volumes? And is there value to doing it that way or not? Can we set duplication targets, which is what they've done in Maine? Can we say, we are going to commit to not having more than 2 copies of anything in this particular category? Or we're going to look at our collections and we're going to say, this year we locally are going to commit to getting rid of 5,000 volumes or 10,000 volumes. Should we focus on particular subject areas? Would it make sense to try to tackle subject areas that either make sense to us regionally or subjects that cause us particular difficulty, right? So we could say we care very much about this subject and therefore we want to make sure that we have a copy at least across the state. Or should we say, this is a subject where we know we have a lot of duplication. It's not an easy area for us to make decisions at the local level, but it might be easier to make things collectively. And I'm not sure what that example would be. We could think about working by date. We can think about working by language, right? So maybe deduplicating by language is a good way to think about this. Maybe it's not. Should we think about monographs? Should we think about journals? Should we think about some other format? While we're talking, should we think about doing this prospectively? And we've had some conversations within the Shared Collection Development Committee of the Alliance about trying to do prospective collection development or shared collection development. But retrospective is really what this is all about, right? This is about the existing collections, what we've already duplicated over the years. But if we don't coordinate what we do going forward, we'll continue to duplicate and have to figure out how to deal with it in the future. And maybe that's okay, and maybe it's not. And finally, should we think about this in conjunction with digital access? Should we think about how HathiTrust or licensed access to something that we all share access to might fit into this, or maybe not? So those are the questions that I want to leave you with. That's it for me. I don't know George, whether we want to do questions now or whether we want to just plow through. And should we do a few questions? All right. So I'll take questions or comments or observations. Nothing. Paul?
So Michael, I know you have a high density storage, have you designated those as all
Not,
to retain?
not yet. No, and partly because we moved in there in such a haphazard way, right? We didn't know what was coming back to this building when we moved in there, so we have all these gaps and we have a lot of consolidation projects to do. So my guess is that we would do it as we consolidate, and right. So we have boxes, trays in there that are half full, and they're half full because all the volumes came back to this building. So we have an ongoing project to consolidate trays, and I think so we could commit as we did it, but I don't think we'd want to do it before that. We have other things like the journals that we removed from Pascal that we had already committed to Pascal. We sort of see that as a commitment anyway, and those we would do for sure, and maybe we already have. But otherwise, I think it's hard to make a commitment, not because we wouldn't make a commitment, but because we moved things in such a sloppy way and have to fix it. Anything else? Okay. Great. Thank you.